A construction worker in Toronto is seen hanging on for dear life after his arm got tangled in a tagline.
He went for a ride all the way up to the 23rd floor, sustaining injuries to his arms. More details on this later in the news.
There's a swapper there, like somebody tell him to stop now.
Good evening. I'm CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines. Motorists rejoice at another big-time rollback in oil prices for the second week. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. names Rafael Otilla to head the Energy Department once again. 19 people killed in 2 mass shootings in South Africa over the weekend. Former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe hailed by the United States as a man of vision, as his family and friends pay their respects at a wake in Tokyo. And Twitter sues Elon Musk as the tycoon pulls out of the $44 billion deal to buy the company. Effective Tuesday, oil companies will roll back the prices of petroleum products for the second week. Caltex, Clean Fuel, Petrogas, PTT Philippines, and Sea Oil will reduce gasoline prices by 5 pesos and 70 centavos per liter, while diesel prices will decrease by 6 pesos and 10 centavos per liter. Caltex and Sea Oil will also slash the prices of kerosene by 6 pesos and 30 centavos per liter. The price rollback will take effect tomorrow, July the 12th at 6 o'clock in the morning. The Department of Energy attributed the rollback to the lockdown in Shanghai, China, interest rate hikes by various central banks, and the threat of a recession, which could cause demand destruction. The DOE says that as of July 5, there has been a net increase of 42 pesos and 90 centavos per liter of gasoline, 36 pesos and 35 centavos for diesel, and 30 pesos per liter of kerosene since January of 2022.
The Manila Electric Company, or Meralco, will lower its rates this July. In a statement, Meralco says it will cut power rates by 71 centavos per kilowatt hour this month. So those consuming 200 kilowatts per hour will see a reduction of 142 pesos in their bill. Those consuming 300 kilowatts per hour will have a cut of 213 pesos, and those consuming 400 kilowatts per hour will have 284 pesos shaved off their bill. Although the generation charges have increased, the power distribution company says distribution-related refunds offset it. The Energy Regulatory Commission directed Meralco to refund 21.8 billion pesos to its consumers starting July.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has named Rafael Otilla as Secretary of the Department of Energy. Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles confirmed the reports of Lotilla's appointment. Lotilla was also the Energy Secretary from 2005 to 2007 during the time of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. He also served as President of the Power Sector Assets and Liabilities Management Corporation, or SAM. Prior to his stint in the energy sector, Lotilla was Deputy Director General of the National Economic Development Authority, or NEDA. In a clarification issued by Malacanang tonight, Press Secretary Angeles said the designation of Attorney Rafael Perpetuo Lotilla is right now a nomination, pending clarification of his employment status. Attorney Lotilla, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s personal choice to head the DOE, is currently an independent director of Aboitiz Power and also of Enexor. Section 8 of RA 7638, or the Act of creating the Department of Energy, states that no officer, external auditor, accountant, or legal counsel of any private company or enterprise primarily engaged in the energy industry shall be eligible for appointment as secretary within 2 years from his retirement, resignation, or separation therefrom. Thus, while the matter is reviewed to determine whether an independent director is considered an officer of the company, Lotilla is considered a nominee.
A lawmaker urges President Ferdinand Marcos to place the country under a state of emergency amid a looming food crisis. AGA Party List Representative Nicanor Briones said the move will allow the president to realign the budget and focus all efforts on agricultural programs. Briones said the funding is needed to extend aid to farmers and livestock raisers. He is confident that President Marcos will address the current situation to ensure food security. He also urges President Marcos to create a task force to combat smuggling with the help of intelligence community, military, the National Bureau of Investigation, and private stakeholders. Briones also called on all agricultural and customs officials on the list of partakers in illegal activities to resign from their posts.
The Philippines has logged 10,271 new COVID-19 cases from last week. Data from the Department of Health shows that from July 4 to 10, the average daily cases of COVID-19 infections is 1,467, or 39% increase compared to June 27 to July 3 statistics. 27 new cases are severe and critical, and 50 patients died. But the DOH clarified that out of the 50, 1 died last May, 3 died in February, 8 died in January, and the rest died in 2021, and 1 from May 2020.
The Marcos administration may consider making optional the wearing of face masks, but with conditions. Eden Santos tells us more.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is considering the possibility of voluntary mask wearing on the condition that everybody is safe and there will be no more surge in COVID-19 cases in the country. The president asked all local government units to revive and intensify the large-scale drive for booster shots. He spoke virtually with officials of the Department of Interior and Local Government, Department of Education, and the Department of Health. President Marcos stressed the importance of continued booster rollout, especially for students preparing to go back to face-to-face classes in the next school opening.
Napakahalaga ng booster shot, lalo na ngayon tumataas na naman ang mga kaso at ibabalik na natin ang mga estudyante sa face-to-face.
Being the fastest country to implement its vaccination program, Israel has lifted the mandatory wearing of face masks after it declared itself COVID-free last April. This was the same case with Bhutan, New Zealand, and China, among other countries that have scrapped their mask mandates. The president, who once again contracted the virus, is just finishing his 7-day home isolation after he tested positive in an antigen test last July 8. Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angela said the president is doing well as per his personal physician, Dr. Samuel Zacate. The president continues to do his job even in isolation with the help of technology. Eden Santos reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
An infectious disease expert has warned of increased dengue cases in the country amid the rainy season. That's also why Dr. Ron Jean Solante suggests that the government restudy the possibility of administering the Dengvaxia vaccine to patients. In other Asian countries, the Dengvaxia vaccine is used, while here in the Philippines, where dengue cases are high, the vaccine continues to be suspended and unlicensed.
It's high time that if in case the government should consider having the Dengvaxia, they should review the data, they should review the benefit of this vaccine, which is prevention of hospitalization and prevention of severe dengue. Siguro ang importante lang dito, tamang rekomendasyon at tamang indikasyon kung kailan natin gagamitin at kung saang edad gagamitin para malinaw at hindi tayo walang hesitations.
Data from the Department of Health shows that dengue cases reached 64,797 from January 1 to June 25. This was a 90% increase from the 34,074 cases recorded in the same period in 2021. Most cases come from regions 3, 7, and 9, with 224 or 274 deaths recorded. Dr. Solante reminds the public to keep all areas clean and consult a doctor when experiencing symptoms to avoid severe dengue and hospitalization.
4 lawmakers have revived a House bill that aims to boost internet transactions and e-commerce in the Philippines. Vic Sumintak has the details.
House Bill number 4 is introduced once again in the House of Representatives with an aim to grow the local electronic commerce sector. Presumptive House Speaker and later Representative Martin Romualdez, along with Ilocos Norte Congressman Ferdinand Alexander Marcos, Tingog Party List Representatives Yada Marie Romualdez, and Jun Asidre authored the bill. The same proposal was introduced in the 18th Congress, but the proposal did not push through. Based on the study by Google and Temasek, in Southeast Asia alone, the internet company is fast growing. Its gross merchant value, or GMV, is now worth $100 billion and is projected to reach $300 billion by 2025. Although it has 76 million internet users, the Philippines recorded the lowest GMV of $7 billion. Compare that to Malaysia's $11 billion, Vietnam's $12 billion, Singapore's $12 billion, Thailand's $16 billion, and Indonesia's $40 billion. A study shows that micro, small, and medium enterprises do not use electronic transactions regularly due to a lack of policies and regulations and slow internet services. If the bill is passed in the 19th Congress, the Internet Transaction and E-Commerce Bill will strengthen Republic Act 8792 or the Electronic Commerce Act of 2000. It will pave the way for the creation of the E-Commerce Bureau under the Department of Trade and Industry, which supervise all electronic business transactions in the country. Vic Sumintak reporting for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
At least 19 people were killed and several injured in 2 mass shootings in South Africa on Saturday evening and the early hours of Sunday, according to local police. One incident occurred at a local tavern in Johannesburg, Soweto Township just after midnight. The Office of Gauteng Police Commissioner said a group of men armed with rifles and 9mm pistols entered the tavern and started shooting randomly at the patrons. As a result, 12 people were declared dead at the scene. 3 died later, while 8 others were injured. Police said the casualties were between 19 and 35 years of age. Media reports suggest that the attackers fled in a white Toyota Quantum minibus. Just a few hours before the tragedy in Soweto, 2 gunmen opened fire in a tavern in Pietermaritzburg in the capital city of KwaZulu-Natal province. Police reported that 2 people were declared dead at the scene and another 2 died in the hospital. 8 people are still undergoing treatment after sustaining injuries. The age of the victims in this case ranged from 30 to 45 years old. A police spokesperson said in a statement that the suspects fled the scene after the incident, adding that the investigation is ongoing.
At least 16 pilgrims died and 40 others were missing after a cloudburst hit the Baltal base camp of Shri Amarnath Yatra in central Kashmir's Gandarbal district. Video footage shows a camp in Sonamarg where rescuers brought the injured people by helicopter. Local news said the gushing waters hit the base camp, also damaging 25 tents and 3 community kitchens. The 43-day annual event began on June 30. However, it was suspended following the tragedy. A decision on its resumption will be made after rescue operations are completed, according to a senior administration official. Next on Mata ng Agila International. Japan's ruling coalition wins big in vote held days after former Premier Abe's murder. Sri Lankans occupy presidential palace until President Rajapaksa steps down. And EU accused of triggering a global famine due to its sanctions on Russian fertilizer exports. We will be back after this short break. Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Washington's top diplomat hailed former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe as a man of vision as he offered condolences in Tokyo, where a private wake for the murdered politician is being held. Maricar Velasco reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made a previously unscheduled trip to Japan while on an Asia tour to offer condolences to the bereaved family of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Blinken said he was there because they were friends, and when one friend is hurting, the other friend shows up. After meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, Blinken told reporters that Abe did more than anyone to elevate the relationship between the United States and Japan to new heights.
We will do everything we can to help our friends carry the burden of this loss. He had the rarest of qualities, a man of vision with the ability to realize that vision.
Blinken said he handed Kishida letters from U.S. President Joe Biden for Abe's family, who is holding a private wake for the country's longest-serving prime minister at Zojoji Temple in Tokyo. Top politicians and business figures are expected to attend, with a family funeral held at the same location on Tuesday and public memorials at a later date. For her part, Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen pays her respects to the late Abe at her memorial site inside the Japanese de facto embassy in Taipei. The island's national flag also flew at half-staff to honor Abe. Meanwhile, Australia's landmark Opera House in Sydney lights up in the colors of the Japanese flag in honor of the slain former Japanese Prime Minister. Maricar Velasco reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The assailant of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe targeted the ex-leader with a belief that he was linked to a certain religious organization that authorities have not yet named. Japanese media reports said 41-year-old Tetsuya Yamagami blamed the religious group for his family's financial troubles after his mother made large donations to it. Abe was shot while speaking at a political event in Nara, Japan, 2 days before the election. Yamagami denied that Abe's political beliefs motivated the shooting. He said he chose to make an attempt on the former Liberal Democratic Party leader's life after initially planning to target an executive of the religious group. Investigative sources told local media that Yamagami, who spent 3 years in Japan's Navy, had watched YouTube videos to learn how to build homemade guns, like the one used in the attack. Reports said the gun Yamagami made to shoot Abe was designed to fire 6 projectiles at a time. Outside the Liberal Democratic Party headquarters in Tokyo, people form a long queue to pay their respects to the former premier.
Filipinos have also conveyed their condolences on the death of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The Japanese embassy in Manila continues to welcome those who want to express their sympathies. Mean Corvera reports.
The Japanese embassy in Manila has opened its doors to individuals who want to sign the book of condolences for the death of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Abe was shot last Friday while delivering a speech at a campaign event in Nara, Japan. The Japanese embassy said the book of condolences is open to the public from today until tomorrow, July 12, between 9 a.m. and 12 noon, as well as between 2 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. Presumptive Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri was among the first to sign the condolence book. Zubiri described Abe as a close friend of the Philippines who helped the country with its various endeavors, particularly regarding transportation, agriculture, and the promotion of peace in Mindanao. These were under the guise of signed agreements and project finance under the Japan International Cooperation Agency and official development assistance. Zubiri mentioned the ongoing Metro Manila subway system project as one of Abe's legacies in the Philippines. Vice President Sara Duterte also visited the official residence of Japanese Ambassador Kazuhiko Koshikawa this afternoon to extend her heartfelt and personal sympathy on the death of Abe. Vice President said the love and support that Abe gave to the Philippines would never be forgotten. The Japanese flag outside the embassy is at half-mast to mourn the death of the former Prime Minister. Mean Corvera reporting for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Japan's ruling coalition won enough votes to form a supermajority in an election held just 2 days after the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The late Abe's ruling Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, and its coalition partner, Komeito, won more than 75 of the 125 upper house seats up for grabs, according to national news outlets. The parties are part of what is now a two-thirds supermajority willing to amend the country's pacifist constitution, thereby strengthening its military role on the global stage, a longtime goal of Abe. Even before the former premier's murder, the coalition was expected to cement its majority. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida insisted the election proceed despite the assassination. He said violence must never be allowed to suppress speech. Abe was gunned down Friday. His body was brought to his family home in Tokyo on Saturday.
Protesters in Sri Lanka continue to occupy the country's presidential palace a day after storming it, forcing President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to announce his resignation. And they say they are not prepared to leave until Rajapaksa officially quits. The president was forced to flee Saturday when people enraged by the economic crisis on the South Asian island stormed the palace. They blamed the 73-year-old Rajapaksa for their misery. The country has shortages of food, medicine, and fuel. Rajapaksa said to ensure a peaceful transition, he will step down on July 13th. In the meantime, the protesters plan to stay in the palace where they are having a first-hand look at his luxurious lifestyle. They are lounging in the building's opulent rooms, going through Rajapaksa's clothes and diving into the compound's pool. Protesters also occupied his seafront office and set fire to the Prime Minister's official residence. The Prime Minister was not there at the time. Troops had fired in the air to help him escape. He then boarded a naval craft which steamed to the safety of the island's southern waters.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken claimed that Russian aggression in Ukraine may have been partly to blame for the turmoil in Sri Lanka. The island nation has been in a state of unrest for several months, with food and fuel in short supply and prices skyrocketing. Sri Lanka also defaulted on its foreign debt in May for the first time in its history. The economic crisis escalated last weekend as thousands of protesters stormed the president's residence, forcing him to flee.
You asked about the impact of the Russian aggression in Ukraine on food insecurity and the impact potentially on Sri Lanka. Well, I think we're seeing that impact around the world, and it may be one of the contributing factors to what's happened in Sri Lanka, although I think there were, as I just said, many others that have come together. But what we are seeing around the world is growing food insecurity that has been significantly exacerbated by the Russian aggression against Ukraine, as we've had opportunity to discuss.
Blinken reiterated his call on Moscow to allow 20 million tons of grain to leave Ukrainian ports, which, in his opinion, Russian forces are blocking as part of their military offensive. He also added that in Thailand, fertilizer prices have gone sky high due to the alleged blockade. Russia, meanwhile, denies all accusations of blocking food exports. Moscow says it has been offering safe passage to freighters, but Ukraine is preventing civilian ships from leaving ports, and including in Odessa.
The founder of chemical giant Eurochem has claimed that sanctions imposed on Russian and Belarusian fertilizer producers are akin to weapons of mass destruction in the scale of damage they will cause over the next few years. In an interview with a Swiss newspaper, Andrei Melnichenko said the sanctions have hit innocent people the worst, and he has no doubt that billions of people will feel their effects. He estimates that Eurochem products have helped feed almost 274 million people. Melnichenko also said with Eurochem's fertilizers not being produced and sold due to sanctions, the effect would be far worse than what is happening now over the cut in grain exports from Ukraine.
Thousands of people took to the streets of Buenos Aires, Argentina over the weekend. They are upset with the government's economic policies. Argentina has been ravaged by inflation, which has been running over 60%. The country also has a huge national debt. The protesters say a debt restructuring deal Argentina has with the International Monetary Fund is responsible for the government's tight economic policies. The protests took place as the country celebrated Independence Day on Saturday. In his Independence Day speech, President Alberto Fernandez called for unity and urged the opposing movements to work toward it.
Britain under Prime Minister Boris Johnson is running into the biggest headwinds in 5 decades, while with its economy still reeling from Brexit and the pandemic. Now, what has happened to Johnson's levelling up policy? Let's hear from our UK correspondent, Eribel Celestino.
When Britain left the European Union, politicians promised economic benefits for parts of the country which had previously fallen behind. Now preparing to step down as Prime Minister, Boris Johnson has pledged that leveling up would see improved transport links and job prospects across areas such as the north of England. But with inflation at its highest level in decades and the so-called Brexit dividend yet to materialize, residents of cities like Bradford are wondering if Johnson's policy was any more than just a campaign slogan. Better rail links were a key part of this pledge, with a high-speed line planned to link Bradford with Manchester and Leeds. Every time a train comes into Bradford station, when all its passengers have boarded, it has to reverse out again to leave. The lack of a through line symbolizes the poor transport links, which can leave this city of 500,000 feeling like it's a dead end. From the United Kingdom, I am Arabel Celestino for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Next up, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken vows to keep U.S. pressure on Myanmar regime. Free flu jab extended to protect more Queenslanders. And Pakistan's prized mango harvest hit by water scarcity. Production falls by 40%. Find out more when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Pasiglahin ang araw ng linggo. Kayo'y maaantig.
Huwag mo ubusin ang luha mo sa wala dito.
Mapapaisip.
What are we gonna do?
Matatawa.
Why so much food? Even no money, no honey, we make utang-utang.
Mapapahanga. At mapapainda. Kasama si Daking, ang nag-iisang comedy king Dolphy.
Ano pangalan mo? Big po. Big po. Ano mo si Fernando po?
Tito Vic and Joey.
Mahirap ikwento, Vicky. Mahabang istorya.
At marami pang artista na pinagigiliwan noon magpahanggang ngayon.
My love, my love, my love, my endless love.
Sine Throwback. Tuwing linggo, alas 12 ng tanghali sa Net 25.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Meeting democracy activists on a visit to Thailand, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken vows to let up on, or no let up on pressuring Myanmar's junta. He says China should agree. Blinken meets with Thailand's leadership. He hails the kingdom's role in a renewed U.S. push in Southeast Asia. In a meeting held off-camera to protect family members, the top U.S. diplomat hears from young democracy activists. Myanmar's military tossed out the civilian government in February 2021, ending a decade-long democratic transition nurtured by Washington. Blinken acknowledges that the U.S. strategy of sanctions on the junta has not borne fruit. He promises, though, that Washington is still focused, even as it puts a priority on combating the war in Ukraine.
It's unfortunately safe to say that we've seen no positive movement. And on the contrary, we continue to see the repression of the Burmese people. We will continue to look for ways that we can, and other countries, can effectively put pressure on the regime to move back to the democratic path.
Tens of thousands of people have fled Myanmar. Since the military toppled and arrested civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, humanitarian conditions have deteriorated and ethnic conflicts have intensified.
Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov has claimed in an interview with The Times that Ukraine has amassed 1 million soldiers at the behest of President Volodymyr Zelensky to recapture its southern areas. Reznikov added that Kyiv has approximately 700,000 in the armed forces, and when one adds the National Guard, police, and border guard, Ukraine's forces are around 1 million strong. The minister also praised the British effort to help Ukraine, especially Ben Wallace, Britain's defense secretary. According to him, Wallace helped shift the approach from providing Soviet equipment to granting NATO standard 155mm artillery, guided multiple launch rocket systems, and high-tech drones. This, Reznikov stressed, will make up for heavy losses in the Donbass region in the face of mass Russian artillery shelling. Zelensky previously said Ukraine was losing some 200 men a day in the area. Reznikov also mentioned other allies, claiming an anti-Kremlin coalition was born in London, Washington, D.C., and other capitals, and together they will have to win the war.
Former White House strategist Steve Bannon has told the January 6 committee investigating the attack on the U.S. Capitol that he may be willing to testify after all. Bannon, who was in contact with former President Donald Trump in the days leading up to the riot on January 6 last year, refused to comply with a subpoena issued last fall, claiming executive privilege from Trump. Thus, both the committee and full House voted to hold him in contempt of Congress charges. The House Select Committees recently received a letter from attorney Robert Costello, Bannon's lawyer. It stated that the former advisor would now testify at the hearing due to a change of circumstances. The circumstances that have changed, according to several news sources, is that former U.S. President Donald Trump waived the executive privilege that reportedly allowed him to not comply with the committee's original request. In addition to Costello's letter to the committee, Bannon's lawyer also provided a letter from Trump to Bannon, formally waiving the executive privilege. It is unclear when the committee will call upon Bannon to testify and whether it will take place in the requested public hearing or behind closed doors first. But this trial on the contempt charges is set to begin on July 18.
Aiming for more residents to have an extra layer of protection against the common flu, the free vaccination campaign in Queensland, Australia, has been extended. Alyssa Ventura reports.
In an effort to curb the spread of influenza cases across the state, free flu vaccines are now available for Queenslanders until July 17 this year. From late May of this year, Queensland has seen a sudden increase of influenza cases within the state. Influenza, or the common flu, affects the upper respiratory tract and the lungs. It is commonly caused by type A or B influenza viruses. Flu symptoms include fever, sore throat, dry cough, headache, muscle pains, and weakness. Every Queenslander aged 6 months and above can get their free influenza vaccines from GPs and pharmacies. As the colder days approach, the state government extends the free influenza vaccine program to ensure that Queenslanders receive adequate protection against the disease. Alyssa Ventura, Townsville, Australia. Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
With households across the United States combating rising prices one paycheck at a time, the state of Nevada shells out $50 million in funds to help families pay for childcare. In Las Vegas, Anna Cui has the details.
Governor Steve Sisolak officially launched the Nevada Child Care Fund Thursday to help families reduce childcare costs across Nevada. In June, the Interim Finance Committee approved $50 million to improve accessibility and affordability for families that qualify for childcare assistance. These funds will be used to cover more of the cost of childcare for those who meet the program qualifications. This funding, as the governor promised during his last State of the State address, will help lower childcare costs for parents, keep childcare centers open, and keep their workers on the job. In Southern Nevada, families can contact the Las Vegas Urban League at childcarelv.org, who will accept applications and answer questions about the program. This is a much welcome news to Nevada families as inflation is at its highest in 40 years and higher childcare costs is the last thing families need. In the U.S., it's been too expensive for many, especially for young parents with small children who are just starting out in their careers. While public school education starting from kindergarten is free, childcare fees are an out-of-pocket cost, and some use a great part of their income towards it. Some are faced with the choice to work or stay home to care for the kids because their income would barely cover the cost for childcare. According to a 2021 report by the U.S. Treasury Department, the childcare sector is an underfunded part of the U.S. economy, which is one of the reasons it says that the system has not been working out for many families. While over 100 prominent economists wrote a letter to Congress in 2021 expressing their support for long-term childcare investments and stating that American families and economic growth have been held back by the lack of modern care infrastructure, some policymakers argue that it will be an overstep and will only worsen the current state of inflation. In Las Vegas, the average cost of infant childcare is $1,365 a month and around $806 for preschool, according to Tourist.com. Anna Cui, Las Vegas, Nevada, mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Environmental activists blocked traffic on a Paris motorway, demanding a renovation of the French housing stock. The group, during a renovation or last renovation, calls for a comprehensive and energy-efficient renovation of the French housing stock by 2040. Footage shows protesters staging a sit-in on the highway, prompting scuffles with commuters who attempted to drag members of the group from the road. The action was carried out on the Parisian Ring, south of Paris near Porte de Versailles. Police immediately arrived at the scene and detained the activists.
Mango farmers in Pakistan say production of the prized fruit has fallen by up to 40% in some areas because of high temperatures and water shortages. Take a look. The arrival of mango season in Pakistan is eagerly anticipated, with around 24 varieties arriving through the hot, humid summers. This year, however, temperatures rose sharply in March, months earlier than usual, followed by heat waves that damaged crops and depleted water levels in canals farmers depend on for irrigation. The country is among the world's top exporters of mangoes, harvesting nearly 2 million tons annually across southern parts of Punjab and Sindh. The total harvest is yet to be measured, but production is already short by at least 20 to 40% in most areas, according to Gohram Baloch, a senior official at the Sindh Provincial Government's Agriculture Department. Pakistan is one of the world's or the most water-stressed countries in the world, a problem made worse by poor infrastructure and mismanagement of resources. It also ranks as the 8th most vulnerable country to extreme weather due to climate change, according to the Global Climate Risk Index compiled by environmental NGO German Watch.
On a beach in northeastern Qatar, children wave goodbye to 2 baby hawksbill turtles, a species that has a 1 in 1,000 chance of surviving to adulthood. Predators, climate change, fishing nets, and marine pollution all contributed to the classification of these narrow-beaked creatures as critically endangered in 1996. But a conservation program in Qatar is hoping to revive the dwindling species, releasing thousands of hatchlings into the sea each year, now with the help of young children. The Qatari program was launched as far back as 2003. In the last 5 years, it has sent some 30,000 hatchlings into the sea, including 9,000 in 2020 when the pandemic cleared the waters of their human visitors. Between April and June, Qatari environmentalists watch for female hawksbills that have arrived at Fuwairit Beach to give birth, measuring them, providing care if needed, and sometimes attaching tracking devices. The nests are moved from under the sand on the main beach and placed under an awning to protect them from tides and predators. 60 days later, at the time of hatching, the good and healthy ones will be released into the sea, and other smaller tired ones will be released in a pool to allow them to grow stronger first.
About 2,800 firefighters are battling several wildfires in central and northern Portugal. Between Friday and Saturday, nearly 250 fires were reported as the country is being baked in a heat wave that has seen temperatures soar above 40 degrees Celsius. The blazes have destroyed 2 homes. About 40 firefighters and civilians have been injured. Most were treated on the spot for breathing problems or exhaustion. The government had asked the European Union to trigger its common civil protection mechanism, which will give Portugal access to 2 water bombers stationed in Spain. Coming up, billionaire Elon Musk to be sued by Twitter after pulling out of their $44 billion deal. Construction worker caught and suspended on a crane line. And karateka Juna Chuki bags Philippines' first gold in 2022 World Games. These and more stories coming your way when Matanang Agila International returns.
This port?
Mary!
Ililigtas ko siya! Kapag kailangan mamili, kaninong buhay ang unang ililigtas? Sino ang iyong uunahin?
Doktor, anong ibig niyo?
Si Minho, pamilya at prinsipyo. Ang puhunan sa pag-asenso.
Kahit na umasenso siya, galing pa rin siya sa kahirapan at hindi na yun maalis sa pagkatao niya.
Si Airy, isang surgeon na magaling. Malayo pa ang maaaring marating.
Mapopromote na bilang head surgeon ng anak ko sa ospital. Mas deserve niya ang higit pa.
Hindi mo na kailangan si Minho.
Si Junseo, ang ambisyon, walang kinikilalang limitasyon.
Pakasalan mo ako.
At si Jiwoo, masagulero.
Ang lalakas ng loob niyo, tigil niyo yan!
Ito talagang itinuro ko sa anak ko. Na kapag may nakita kang ibang taong inaagrabyado, lumapit ka, tulungan siya. Kahit na mahirap ako, poprotektahan ko siya sa mga taong tulad nyo.
Kapag nalaman kong may ginawa kayo, ako mismo ang maniningil sa'yo. Tandaan mo yan.
Fatal Promise. Simula July 18, 8:30 p.m.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's get together. Sa Net 25.
This portion.
And you are still watching Matanang Agila International. Depicting stories of Japanese American fighters during World War II, a photo exhibit and several film screenings are available to the public in Washington, D.C. We have Arlene Ocampo with a report.
Here in Washington, D.C., the Japan Information and Culture Center and the Embassy of Japan present Honoring the Go for Broke Spirit exhibition and film screenings. This exhibition, Go for Broke, is a slang meaning of risking everything for the big win. This display, manifested through the works of Shane Sato, will take you through World War II, telling the story of the Nisei Japanese Americans who fought for the U.S. with the World War II 442nd Regimental Combat Team. He shares personal stories of those who fought along with candid photos. He felt the need for this project so that the next generation could remember a piece of Japanese and American history. In line with this new photo exhibition, there are 3 screenings at the JICC of Stamp Our Story. This documentary talks about the struggles and accomplishments of 3 elderly women who defeated the hindrances of campaigning for a Go for Broke stamp. This stamp is to honor America's Nisei soldiers. The exhibition will be on display until July 22nd, and the documentary will be screened on July 13 and 15. Arlene Ocampo, Matanang Agila International, Washington, D.C., trusted, connected, on point.
Red Cross official Bashir Omar told RT News that the humanitarian situation in Yemen is one of unimaginable horror, with 2/3 of the population deprived of basic health care. Omar called on the international community not to leave the Yemeni people alone facing their fate. With the armed conflict in Yemen in its 8th year, the International Committee of the Red Cross released a report this week stating that around 66% of Yemen's 30.5 million people lack access to basic health care, and those in need of medical attention often risk death to visit the 51% of healthcare facilities still operating in the country. The crisis has been most acutely felt by women and infants. Less than 50% of births in Yemen are attended by healthcare professionals, and 1 mother and 6 newborn babies die every 2 hours, according to the report. Of the estimated 4.2 million people displaced in Yemen since the outbreak of civil war in 2014, 73% are women and children.
Insane footage from Ontario in Canada shows a construction worker caught on a crane line and suspended high above the ground, causing mass panic. The horrifying moment has gone viral on social media. PCL Constructors Canada confirmed that it manages the site and that the rigger who got entangled with the tagline after hooking a load was safely lowered to the work surface and not seriously injured. Their spokesperson added that they are working with all appropriate authorities and the incident is currently under investigation. The Ministry of Labor said it had been notified about the incident, and they assigned an inspector to investigate the shocking accident.
Elon Musk seeks to end his $44 billion bid to buy Twitter, alleging multiple breaches of the agreement. The world's richest person's newest announcement is the latest twist in a long-running saga after he decided to buy Twitter in April. Musk said he had backed out because Twitter failed to provide enough information on the number of spam and fake accounts. In a letter filed with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, Musk's lawyer said Twitter had failed or refused to provide such details. Meanwhile, the social media giant begins to fight back and plans to pursue legal action to enforce the agreement. Twitter chairman Brett Taylor posted that the Twitter board is committed to closing the transaction on the price and terms agreed upon with Mr. Musk. The social media giant also hired the elite law firm Watchell, Lipton, Rosen & Katz. Sources say the San Francisco legal firm, which defends companies in lawsuits over breach of fiduciary duty and a broken merger agreements, is preparing to file its lawsuit against or with the Delaware Court of Chancery against Musk early this week. These events could set up a potentially long and protracted legal battle between Musk and Twitter, as the original merger agreement includes a $1 billion breakup fee.
Uber announced drastic action plans to scale back its business as its losses balloon amid the pandemic lockdowns. The firm also said it would cut 3,000 more jobs, bringing the total reductions in recent weeks to a quarter of the workforce. Chief Executive Dara Khosrow Shahi, in a letter to the staff, said that Uber is also closing or consolidating more than 40 offices and winding down units such as its artificial intelligence lab. The workforce cuts do not include drivers, whom Uber considers independent contractors. The head of the firm added such moves were necessary to continue their mission and to secure Uber's future. Combined, the action should reduce spending by $1 billion, the company said. Khosrow Shahi also pressed that they must establish themselves as a self-sustaining enterprise that no longer relies on new capital or investors to keep growing, expanding, and innovating. Still, before the pandemic, Uber was grappling with huge losses, and its challenges have multiplied as activity plunges during the pandemic. According to their data, the number of Uber rides dropped 80% last month at the height of lockdowns in U.S. and Canada. Meanwhile, though its Uber Eats food delivery business has surged, it remains loss-making.
Wimbledon champion Novak Djokovic says he is still not planning to receive the COVID-19 vaccine, which would rule him out of the 2022 U.S. Open. His only hope for U.S. authorities to change the entry rules in time to allow him to compete. The Serbian top seed beat Nick Kyrgios in 4 sets to win his 7th title at the All England Club and 21st Grand Slam crown overall, leaving him just 1 behind Rafael Nadal. Now he is targeting a 4th U.S. Open crown after losing to Daniil Medvedev in the final last year. But as things stand, his unvaccinated status means he cannot play in the tournament, which starts next month. Earlier in January, the Serb was deported from Australia over his vaccination status, preventing him from defending his Australian Open title.
The Philippines has bagged its first gold medal at the ongoing 2022 World Games in Birmingham, Alabama, in the U.S. Junet Suki delivered the gold after winning in women's kumite under 50-kilogram event. The 30-year-old karateka won over Yorgelis Salazar of Venezuela in the final 2-0. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in a Facebook post congratulated Suki. The president said he salutes Suki and all the Filipino athletes participating in the competition.
And now let's look back at important events that happened today in history. In 1960, the novel To Kill a Mockingbird was first published. With racial prejudice as its primary theme, the novel has been translated into some 40 languages and has sold more than 40 million copies worldwide. It is widely believed that American author Harper Lee based the plot on her father's unsuccessful defense of 2 African-American men convicted of murder, the only criminal case he ever took as a lawyer. In 1984, the Reagan administration ordered automakers to install airbags or automatic seatbelts in new cars by 1989. That time, only 12% of Americans used seatbelts voluntarily. The decision, after 15 years of controversy, was applauded by the auto industry but criticized by insurance companies and consumer activists. And in 2011, Neptune completed its first orbit since its discovery on September 23, 1846. The eighth and outermost planet in our solar system takes 164.79 years to revolve around the sun. It is also the only giant planet that is not visible without a telescope.
Well, tonight's broadcast ends with a quote from former UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill. The pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. The optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty.
A beautiful quote to start the week with.
And you just know which one you are, right?
I know. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates in our social media channels. I'm CJ Hero.
And I'm Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.